You've seen the best.
You've seen the worst.
Now here's the rest of both worlds.
I'm GayFesh, and I'm an ugly bag of mostly water.
And I'm Ari, and it's a good thing I'm cute, or I could really be obnoxious.
And today we will be discussing the Star Trek The Next Generation episodes Home Soil and Coming of Age. So we're about halfway through the first season of The Next Generation, and these are the first episodes that you have seen that you did not see on your first watch through before we started the podcast, right?
That's correct. So it was one of these two episodes we're going to discuss today that prompted me to jokingly text you and say, podcast idea.
Wasn't it your husband that actually came up with the idea?
Maybe it was. No, I think I came up with the idea and he told me to actually text it to you. Because originally I wasn't going to text you. I was just like joking. And he said, no, really, you should text GayFesh and say we should do a podcast. And so I did. And here we are.
Well, thanks, Darren.
Exactly. Thanks, Darren. He's also one of our best, fans. He's always excited when the new episodes come out.
Well, it's always nice to have somebody listening. I listen to the podcast when I'm driving just because I'm like, I want to bump the stats up.
We listen to it when we're driving so he can hear it. And then that gives me an idea of, what it sounded like, things that worked, things that didn't, because I'm constantly editing myself as we're learning to do this. I've never done a podcast before. So not only is it my first time with The Next Generation, it's my first time with a podcast. I've been a guest on a couple, but I've never done one where it was my responsibility to come up with content and things to talk about and things like that. And it's been an interesting experience from that side as well.
I have been a guest on a couple podcasts here and there over the years, but yeah, this is my first time running one. Actually, I think we were both on a NaNoWriMo podcast once.
And I guess technically I was involved as like one of the people who ran that one, but I kind of just threw it into my co-host's lap because he knew everything about podcasting. So technically, I guess that was my podcast. But yes, we did a 5-week NaNoWriMo one year when I was the municipal liaison with Manda, who was on for Haven. She was also the municipal liaison at that time. So that was not the first time Amanda and I have done a podcast together. And then I also was on a couple episodes of Serial Nonsense, which no longer exists, which was the same person who did our NaNoWriMo podcast, ran that podcast. And it was just a random podcast where guys got together in a room and talked about whatever.
It was a nice studio setup because we recorded in the same space, right?
Yeah. It was nicely set up. He had a lot of good stuff. That's why when he said, hey, do you want to do a NaNoWriMo one? I was like, sure, let's do it.
Well, and here we are. Now we get into episodes you haven't seen yet.
I know, and I'm pretty excited. Yeah. Me too. These episodes were great. I liked both of them. They were funny, but they also had some good stuff going on in them. I don't know. I liked both these ones a lot. I have 3.5 pages of notes on the first one.
Well, then let's go ahead and get into it.
So today we're going to start with talking about Home Soil, which is the 17th episode of the first season of The Next Generation. It originally aired on the 22nd of February, 1988. The teleplay was by Robert Sabaroff, story by Carl Giors, Ralph Sanchez, and Robert Sabaroff, and it was directed by Corey Allen.
When the Enterprise D visits an outpost in the process of terraforming a dead planet, they find the science team threatened by a mysterious new form of life.
So they sort of just give the whole plot away in that, don't they?
Yeah, it's that's a kind of a spoiler. You don't find that out till about halfway through.
Yeah, no, you don't. I did figure it out pretty early in this one, though. Like, I figured out the story really early because they said something about how we need to take the sodium out of the water. And I was like, And then later on, it turned out that they were pissing it off by taking away their salt water.
So before you realized that there was aliens and it was just kind of being set up as like a whodunit, who do you think done it?
Oh, I figured it was somebody on the planet the whole time because there's this very pointed statement about it being an uninhabited world. And the way that they said that, yes, we're here to terraform this uninhabited world or something like that. And I was like, I bet it's not as uninhabited as you think it is. And then it turned out I was right.
So you always knew it was an alien.
I always knew.
Going in, I only half remembered this episode, and I was thinking, I'm like, now, is there an alien on this planet, or is it just a murder mystery where it's one of the four or one of the three people who killed the other dude?
If I had to guess, I would have thought the old guy because he was so cagey on the Skype call with Picard.
I wouldn't have guessed him because he's the obvious choice. In my mind, it was between the other dude, I don't even remember his name, and then Kim. And I was leaning toward Kim because she was the most sympathetic character. I was just like, yeah, that would end up being her, wouldn't it? And but no, turned out to be aliens. Just like an episode of Doctor Who.
So when they first come into the space station where they're doing the terraforming, and Bjorn, which means bear, that's my Swedish for you today. That's like the only word I remember. He's all excited and asking way too many personal questions about Data and his planet of origin and all this stuff. Deanna looks like she's about to like take him down. She looks so mad that he's asking all these intrusive questions about Data.
I wasn't even looking at her. That's interesting.
Yeah. She looks like she's like a mama bear that someone just used the wrong pronouns on their child. I was just like, oh, I know that look.
Well, keep in mind, like, she's down there because she's mega sus of everyone aboard. Like, she's like, after that first call where the guy's like, look, stop bothering us, leave us alone. She's like, no, something's going on here, and I'm going to find out what it is. And you definitely
didn't need to be a betazoid to know that something was going on.
Right. But I think she was probably just in investigate mode, so maybe that was why her face was like that the whole time. She's like, I'm just reading your thoughts.
Maybe it was, but it seemed like he was asking way too many, probing questions about Data. And actually, before it was aliens, I thought it was going to be a computer virus or something, and I thought Data was going to get infected, especially when he went into that room, because he's a computer.
Fun plot twist.
Yeah. So it was like, I thought it was going to be a computer thing because of the computer controlling the laser, but then it turned out to be tiny, wisty aliens. It did sound like Darth Vader in there, though. At first, I was like, are there lightsabers in that room? What's happening? And then it turned out to be a laser cutter or something. But yeah, I was like
a laser drill.
I hear lightsabers. Ms. Magrathea, or whatever you want to, the Gardener of Edens, she was really excited about her job. Like, she loved her job. I thought that was really interesting. There's a lot of parallels to Magrathea, right? It felt like there was a lot of parallels to Hitchhiker's Guide in creating an entire planet and taking pride in it, kind of like Slarty Bart Fast.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. Terraforming is a pretty common thing in science fiction. So I would say the parallels there are pretty broad. I didn't make the connection. In fact, the first time he said Magrathea, I actually forgot what that was until he said Hitchhikers. I'm like, oh yes, okay, yes. No, I think she's just passionate about her job. She likes what she does.
Yeah, she really does. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, like, you can see there's a true passion and, like, behind her. Like, she did a good job of acting. But you know who didn't do a good job of acting? Bjorn. Did Bjorn win a walk-on role from Cheerios? Because that guy, I keep feeling like Cheerios is or people are gonna think Cheerios is sponsoring our podcast because I bring it up so much. But he like went to the William Shatner like school of acting, because there's one point where he goes, a year's work destroyed, and I was like, oh no. Well, I just did not like Bjorn, apparently.
I wouldn't say a William Shatner school of acting, because when William Shatner does those poignant pauses, they work for him.
That's true. I thought it was a little weird that, oh man, I can't think the other guy's name either, but Beverly is trying to save him, and she's like, I couldn't save him. The wounds were too deep, but in the actual shot, he looked like he just had a scrape on his arm. I thought that was funny.
I don't know. Maybe he had rolled over on like the deep piercing wound or something like that.
That must be it, because yeah, it just looked like he got a little scrape on his arm, and I thought he was going to be okay.
It was probably, it's a laser, so I'm sure it was burns that had gone deep, so it might not have even been something that directly cut him. It might have just burned him all the way to the bone or something.
True, yeah, especially because we know from Star Wars that, lightsabers cauterize, so a laser might cauterize.
Yeah, a laser probably would. Don't they use lasers surgery specifically for that reason these days?
Do they? I don't know. A robot did my surgery, my hysterectomy, and took it all out.
Nice.
And when I had tumors, and I was a little weirded out that a robot was doing surgery against me. Against
you.
I have a problem with robots.
Well, I'm pretty sure they still had a surgeon operating the robot, right?
Yes, there was a surgeon operating the robot.
They didn't just like give a surgical degree to a robot, to Wally or anything like that.
Yeah, I'd trust Wally. He's pretty good. Eve, she's a little intense.
I would not trust Wally with surgery. He's a little clumsy.
True, he is. Did they send Riker to go screw the information out of that lady?
I was like, I'm feeling some rapport here, but it's not the right time, Riker. She's in mourning.
Well, but like Picard turns to him and goes, "You might have a way of getting the information out of her." And then all of a sudden he's in the room like talking sexy to her. And I was like, no, this is inappropriate, William Riker.
This is not the time.
Yes.
You need to be thinking about getting the sand wet.
Right, because they need to go home to wet sand. So this is about the time where the episode actually takes off, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, now we've had a bunch of science babble about terraforming. There was a lot of extraneous sci-fi babble at the beginning of this episode.
Hey, welcome to Star Trek.
And we finally get down to like what's happening, and they zoom in on the creatures that I guess toward the end of the episode they were calling microbrains, but I was calling them Wisties because of the Ewok movies, and I'm not talking about Return of the Jedi. I'm talking about Caravan of Courage. I think it was a made-for-TV Ewok movie that had the little girl Sindel and her brother Mace, also known as knockoff Luke Skywalker. And they, in that thing, she gets this candle of like ever-burning flame or something. And eventually there's these little creatures called Wisties. And it's like, at the end, it's like a little flame that dances around and has like a little smiley face on it. It's like a little girl fairy type thing. And they're called Wisties. So when they started reproducing and flashing, I was like, oh, it's the Wisties. I was so excited.
I watched maybe half of Caravan of Courage about 20 years ago while drunk, so I don't remember any of it other than that it was really creepy that the Ewoks were speaking English.
It was real, just all of a sudden. And you know what I found out from looking up, because I wanted to make sure they were called Wisties because I couldn't remember for sure. I was like calling them Wisps, and I was like, no, I don't think that's right. And it actually happened. That movie happens on 5 ABY after the Battle of Yavin. So that movie actually takes place before the Battle of Endor. And really? I didn't know that. I always assumed that movie took place after the Battle of Endor, but with the how old Sindel is, there's no way that's possible. It happened in 5 ABY.
So maybe that's where they got the dress from, and they didn't eat a woman before giving it to Princess
It's
Leia?
Very possible, yes. But how did they lose the language in that time, though?
I don't know.
We're on a very much an Ewok tangent, but how did they go from speaking English to all of a sudden they had no language and they were yub-nubbing their way around with the main characters? I don't understand. Anyway, Sindel and the Wisties. I grew up with Sindel, and I grew up with Caravan and Courage, and the other one that the name is escaping me right now.
Was it the Battle for Endor?
Oh yeah, that's what it's called, right? Because it's the Battle for Endor, and it's way worse. It's hard to believe that it's worse than the first one, but it is way worse than the first one, and it has Wilford Brimley in it. But I didn't get to watch Star Wars growing up. I didn't actually see Star Wars until I was 17 years old.
So your first experience with Star Wars was the Ewok movies?
As a child on TV. And so I thought that Star Wars was a kid's show about a girl named Sindel. And I really did not understand what Star Wars is about until someone sat me down at 17 and was like, oh, you haven't seen Star Wars? And then I became a huge Star Wars fan after that, because I was already a fan of the Ewok movies. So anyway, I was really excited to see the Wisties got another role. I was like, yeah, let's keep that going.
And this episode in particular feels very similar to an original series episode called Devil in the Dark, about a mining planet in which miners are getting murdered by something, and it turns out it is a silicon-based life form called a Horta that is attacking the miners because they are killing its eggs.
Oh, interesting. So it's a callback.
It's a very similar episode. The way that the Silicon alien looks in this episode versus in Devil in the Dark is very different, because in this one they're like little microscopic crystals, and in Devil in the Dark it was a dude in a blanket.
A dude in a blanket?
Look it up. Look up Horta. You'll see it in motion. It's just like a dude in a blanket.
Okay, I will do that. How come that old lady is an ensign? Do you know what I'm talking about? She's down in the
in engineering.
Engineering, and they're like, so-and-so ensign, and I'm like, that old lady, the lady who's as old as Jean-Luc, is an ensign? Did she join Starfleet really late, or is she just really bad at her job?
Well, she had spent some time in the original series as a Metron, so it took a while for her to actually get into Starfleet.
I don't know what that means.
That actress was in the Gorn episode of the original series, the one where Kirk fights the reptile guy in the desert.
Okay, yes.
She played one of the godlike aliens that had put them there to battle.
Oh, so she was there as like a cameo or such.
Yeah, they brought back an actor from the original series to be like,
oh,
here you go.
Cool. I just thought she was pretty old to be an ensign. We're not going to get into my many questions about how Starfleet Academy works until we talk about the next episode.
That's reasonable. I didn't even notice her rank pips, so I just noticed, it's a new engineer this time.
Yeah, I didn't pay attention to the pips either. I just paid attention to the fact that Riker called her ensign. So they get the universal translator up, the babblefish, and they're the first thing that the aliens say is ugly. And I immediately knew they were describing the humans, because it reminded me of when Quark said, oh, they're so ugly, look at their ears, or something like that. I was like, oh, they're insulting the humans, and they look so confused. Jean-Luc's like, what? And then it's like, ugly giant bag. And I was like, oh no. Of mostly water, surrounded by a flexible frame. And I was like, yep, that's human beings. I love Data's, yep, that's an accurate description.
I mostly forgot this episode, but I have always known ugly bags of mostly water. That's
so funny.
It's a description for humans. It's great.
So when the Wisties shake the whole Enterprise and they do their whoa thing, like they're all falling over.
Oh yeah, the bridge roll.
Right. And then so this is strictly for Manda. I noticed when they were doing that, Riker put his hand around Deanna's waist and held her up to make sure she didn't fall.
Ooh, good catch.
Yeah. And I was like,
good eye.
Amanda would be very excited to see that.
I was not looking for that.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't really looking for it either. I just love watching them act that out. Like the whole we're being thrown around the bridge. It's so funny to watch.
I remember seeing Will Wheaton interviewing Jerry Ryan on a podcast, and there were some other non-Trek actors.
Jerry Ryan Sliders?
No, she's 7 of 9 from Voyager.
7 of 9. Okay, who's the Jerry guy in Sliders? Jerry O'Connell or something like that, right?
Oh, was he in Sliders? Because he's also in Lower Decks.
Oh, is he? Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's in Sliders. Anyway, go ahead. We're talking about 7 of 9, though.
Yeah. He was talking with Jerry Ryan and some other people. I don't even remember if it was Will Wheaton's podcast or some other show, but he brought up the how every Star Trek actor knows, how to do the, the bridge shake thing. And so it's like, he's like, okay, 3, 2, 1, hit. And then they both grab the table and shake around and act like this.
That's so funny. Yeah. So he was in Sliders, and I forgot he's also in Stand By Me. Jerry O'Connell. Yeah. So connection to Will Wheaton.
Yeah. And he is also married to Rebecca Romaine, who happens to be in Star Trek as well. She plays number 1 from the Enterprise. She is Pike's first officer.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Now, she's not the first one to play number 1. That was Majel Barrett in the original pilot. But yeah. So she's going to be one of the main characters in Strange New Worlds, which comes out next year, and I'm excited.
That reminds me of a question I had. So Data is 3rd in command of the Enterprise, Deanna says. And Riker's 2nd in command of the Enterprise, but we call him number 1.
Right.
Even though he's 2nd in command.
Because he's the first officer.
Do we call Data number 2, or do we call him number 3? How come Riker's the only one that gets a cool nickname?
Well, because it's, for one thing, it was a reference to number 1 from the original series, but also you really don't want to go around calling somebody number 2.
Number 2. Get over here, number 2. I was really surprised that at no point during this discussion with the silicon-based life forms that it was brought up that he was an android. Like, there was no interaction between the computer man and the computer people. And I thought that was weird, because I thought maybe, especially when they were calling them ugly bags of mostly water, that they would be like, here's one that isn't an ugly bag of mostly water. But they kind of just chose not to talk about Data being a computer, essentially, the whole episode. So I thought that was weird, because the whole episode, I thought Data being a computer, especially how excited that Bjorn was at the beginning that he was an android, was going to come into play. But it was like Chekhov's gun, and it never went off. It was like, okay, where is it going to come into play that Data is not an ugly bag of mostly water?
Yeah. Feels like something they should have done a little bit more with.
I felt like this could also, especially for, the Gardener of Edens, what was her name?
Louisa Kim.
Okay, so I liked her character a lot, but I felt so bad for her when she realized she almost killed an entire civilization of living creatures, and it very much felt like an Ender, plot point.
where he realizes it's not a simulation. He's actually been waging war this whole time.
And he's destroyed an entire civilization, because that's the whole point of Ender's Game and the books that follow, because Ender's Game is the game, which we hate Orson Scott Card now, and I hate him, and I don't like him as a person, but I read these books before we knew he was garbage.
He's a good writer.
He is, and he wrote, and I read both sets, the Ender's Game and the Ender's Shadow series, and I really liked the books after Ender's Game, because it's basically Speaker for the Dead, and the reason he's a Speaker for the Dead is because he destroyed this entire civilization while he was being used as a pawn in the military-industrial complex, essentially, right?
Yeah. And
I really felt for her in that moment, and felt it was very similar origin story, that if she had killed those in that entire culture, of these aliens, that she would have had to live with that guilt for the rest of her life, just like Ender did. And so I thought that was it was kind of only going on in the background, but I thought it was such a poignant part of the episode that was barely touched on.
Yeah, I really liked her performance. She could have been a nothing character, but I feel like she really gave it an earnestness that made her a little more memorable.
She did, and I thought she did a really good job. So the term wet sand is something that's really funny to me, because when my kid was 3 years old, we went to the beach and he kept filling his bucket up with wet sand, and he kept saying it that same way. He'd bring me a bucket and he'd be like, wet sand, mommy. And so me and my ex-husband have been saying to each other for years, wet sand, every time we talk about wet sand. So when they're like, we will send you home to your wet sand, I was like, we'll send you home to your wet sand. And I just thought it was a cute little thing for me at the end of the episode. But overall, I loved this one. I loved the theoretical, what's going on here? Is this life? To me, it really felt like a Star Trek episode. I was watching something that was philosophically talking about life in other parts of the universe and discussing what would happen if we found that life and stuff like that. And I really liked it.
Yeah, I love episodes like this. I love episodes where they discover a new life form, and most of the episode is just them working out how to communicate with it. Because it feels like if you actually were to discover alien life out there, that would be the struggle every episode. You wouldn't just have the universal translator automatically work. So it's nice to see that struggle sometimes.
It is. It is nice to see that struggle. Speaking of that, did you hear, and I have not researched the validity of this yet, but I saw a tweet the other day that said that NASA just hired 36 theologians to gauge how people would feel if they announced there was aliens? I have not researched if it's accurate or true, but somebody who generally researches what they posted it on something that I saw. And I've been meaning to look into it, and then somebody in the comments on their post said that already happened in Contact as a plot point.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that was a major point in Contact, that they didn't want to send her because she was an atheist.
Right. Yeah, I know. And so I was just thought that was interesting, because, man, wouldn't it be great if First Contact is coming? I have been waiting. I have been waiting for aliens my whole life. I love space. When I look at space and think about space, I get cartoon hearts in my eyes, because my whole life I have always just wanted to get on a dang space shuttle and leave this planet. And I know that quietly last year in the middle of the pandemic, while the news cycle was insane, they released a bunch of stuff declassifying a bunch of unidentified flying objects, and now they're hiring theologians, and I am just so ready to meet aliens. And maybe not silicon-based Wisties, but, you know, I'm excited to meet aliens.
I think you're probably a little more hopeful than I am on that aspect. I don't think that's happening.
I know. I can hope, though, right? Like, I've lived in perpetual hope my whole life that eventually, before the time I die, I will be able to go to space. I really just want to go back to space, or I want to go back to space. See, the secret space baby that lives inside of me wants to go back to space. Okay, so my last comment about this before we switch to the other episode is they told them to come back in 3 centuries.
Right.
So I really hope in 2188 someone makes a new episode. In 2188, I hope someone does a 300 years later episode of like a reunion special. Because where are we going to be in 300 years from now on TV? Because apparently we can't write anything new to save our lives, and we're in a horrible cycle of rebooting things right now without a lot of new content. And I want to know... I want to see someone in 300 years from now, like, revisit this episode and go back and see what the Wisties have done with themselves and if they'll interface with us now. I just think that'd be so cool.
Yeah, well, actually, I was thinking about that a bit myself because Star Trek Discovery is set in, like, the 31st century.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was originally set during the same time period as Kirk's Enterprise, but then they jumped through a time portal or something, so now they're 1,000 years in the future.
Oh, okay. Yes, I did hear about the time portal.
They could, in theory, go back to that planet and see what has happened in the interim. That might be an interesting story for them to touch on.
They could, yeah, because it's been 300 years, right? Because it would be 2188 is what I wrote down would be, yeah, because I did the math at the time.
I think
is it off?
Yeah, it should be 2288, right? Because that would be 300 years.
Well, 1988 to 2088. Oh, yes, you're right. You're right. Yep. Me and math. Remember homeschool. Yeah. All right, and next we're going to talk about Coming of Age, which is the 19th episode of the first season. It first aired on the 14th of March, 1988. It was written by Sandy Fries and Hannah Louise Shearer, and it was directed by Mike Vieger.
As Wesley Crusher faces the Starfleet Academy entrance exam on Relva 7, representatives from Starfleet Command conduct an exhaustive investigation into Captain Picard and the Enterprise D crew.
Wesley got a haircut.
Oh, I didn't even notice the haircut.
Yeah, I went back to the last episode just to make sure I was correct. And he kind of had like that boyfriend haircut where that's what somebody I know calls it, where it has that like poof up front where it's like sticking straight up. Anyway, he got a haircut. It's cute. I thought it was cute. Okay, so before we go anywhere on this episode, we got to talk about how getting into Starfleet works.
Okay.
Okay, so once a year they can take a test and they go to Starfleet?
So I assume there are probably multiple ways to get in because obviously you need to be able to fill enough slots in the academy to staff all those ships. But I think it was just like in Wesley's division, like for this specific group of candidates, it was like only one of you is getting in.
It's so weird. Plus, so let's say that Wesley had won. Obviously, he wasn't going to get into Starfleet in the first season.
Right.
But let's say that Wesley had won the spot. Let's say that he got there. Was he stealing a spot from an indigenous person from that planet because it happened to be the planet they were swinging by while they were on the Enterprise?
I don't know that anyone actually indigenously lives on Relva 7. I think that was just a Starfleet outpost.
So they said to these 4 candidates, meet us at this. It's not like Wesley just randomly showed up and crashed the people who live in this planet's test, because that's what it felt like.
No, because there was, there were 2 human candidates and there was a Vulcan candidate and a Benzite. So none of them are native to this planet. They're just, this is where they're meeting to conduct the test.
Well, and in case anybody wants to know, including you, what my hair looked like for most of the 1990s, it was that exact hair that girl had, the one that calls Wesley cute. I got a perm in like 91 because my mom had one, and that was my hair for most of the 90s. That exact color, that exact cut and length. And I was like, this is so weird and I hate it. Please get it off my TV. But Was she human? Was she supposed to be human?
Yeah, she was human.
Okay, so there was the human, the Vulcan. Oh, I got very excited about the Vulcan because that's the first time in TNG we saw one, right?
It's to my recollection, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So there was a Vulcan and a human and the Benzite, and then Wesley was another human.
Yeah.
Okay. It was an interesting, I mean, it follows that trope of a lot of shows, although it's earlier than most of the shows I'm thinking of having a test episode, like where you have to go through a weird test. So it reminded me of that Buffy episode when she turns 18, where they take away her powers and she has to fight a serial killer vampire. So as far as the testing goes, I was kind of disappointed to see that the Kobayashi Maru did not show up. I just, for some reason, expected it to be mentioned at some point.
That is a test once you're in the academy. That would not be a test that you would give to get into the academy because there's no way to beat the Kobayashi Maru. It's a test of your personal character and of how you react to situations. That test is mostly for the benefit of the testee.
I see. Okay. I just thought it was interesting because they talked about like the Mordock maneuver or whatnot, and I was like, oh, that'd be interesting because they're being tested if they made like a reference to Kobayashi Maru, but it didn't happen. So let's talk about that little middle management businessman that was wandering around the Enterprise being mean to everybody. Yeah, that guy.
I hated him so much. I wanted to punch him in the face every time he was on screen.
No, I have this note that says, keep doing whatever it is you're doing, Commander Data. And my notes say, shouldn't you know what he's doing? Because he's flying the dang ship. Like, he's sitting in the con, right? Like, he is flying the ship. Whatever it is you're doing here, like, it made him sound so stupid.
I liked the editing when it just showed him going like interrogating officer after officer, where like the way it would seamlessly transition between the different people he was talking to, where like he'd be holding the same position and asking a question that sounds like it's a follow-up to the previous statement from the other person, but then the camera pans
and then you'd see Worf's reflection in the computer.
Yeah. And that made me think of, there was an episode of Firefly that did a very similar thing when the Alliance has like captured Serenity and they're interrogating the entire crew, and it was cut together like that.
I wonder if it was a nod.
Well, I think it might just be one of those tropes. I don't think it was a direct nod to Star Trek. I think it's just one of those kind of it's a cool interrogation technique.
Yeah, and I thought it was cool. He was a terrible interrogator, though. He was just awful. He was just really bad.
Well, his problem was that he was sent to investigate something and there was nothing for him to find. So he was, kind of set up to fail in that regard.
Yeah, well, I jokingly out loud said when he was like, okay, I'm leaving now, I was like, he's going to ask to join the Enterprise. I said something out loud like, oh, and now I want to join the Enterprise. And I meant it as like a sarcastic joke. And then it came out of his mouth. I was like, oh, I was kidding, but okay. When fist pumps, when Jean-Luc helps him like skip the little, what is that thing he was in called? Shuttle. When he skips the little shuttle off of the ozone layer or whatever they did that was so clever, he fist pumped in the air, and I was like, oh, this guy's having a good time.
Yeah.
Because of the sense of teamwork and a feeling of family.
Yeah, it's something that I think you probably don't get in the Inspector General's office, where your whole job is to be an asshole to other Starfleet officers.
Right. I liked the insults. They were a very scruffy looking nerf herder by that guy. The one with the webbed hand. That was an interesting test. I thought that was an interesting test.
Yeah, that made me think of Tellarites, the pig-nosed dudes from the original series, because they like to argue and they like to be rude and insulting, and so it's a very, very similar cultural technique or affectation. In Star Trek Enterprise, when Captain Archer, Scott Bakula's character, meets a Tellarite who's boarded the Enterprise, the Tellarite says, "I've heard that this ship is the pride of Starfleet, but I find it small and unimpressive." And then Archer goes, "Funny, I was going to say the same thing about you."
That's great. I could never insult people to their face. I'd be terrible at Starfleet. I would not get in, apparently.
Yeah, it's one of those cultural things that you have to learn how to insult the right people.
I did think it was very cute, the way that Wesley got all mad and in his face, though. I thought it was adorable.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, he's never been mean to anyone in his life before.
I know.
He's like, do you want to get violent? I'm like, kid, you don't know how to be violent.
I know. Do you want to get violent? The little kid says. And I'm like, oh. I loved the question to Beverly. How would you characterize your relationship with Captain Picard? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I wanted her to answer like jokingly or whatever. I guess I'm in a mood because this episode just was funny to me, but I really wanted her to be like, well, he's my boyfriend, but only in my dreams. And then have it cut away and have that be it, you know? He's my boyfriend, like Mothman is Ari's boyfriend. Like, I don't know.
Listen, you gotta let it go. Mothman's never coming for you.
I know, but I just
you're in the wrong
so
state for him.
I know. I'm gonna go to West Virginia someday. And I'm gonna wander around the woods, and I'm gonna call out for my boyfriend, and he's not gonna come. So. Something about the future that I'm disappointed in, and we still have time to get there, is we did not end up putting our computers in very complicated pieces of furniture that were very well shellacked. And I'm a little disappointed in us. We still just put our computers on top of our desks and we don't build them into our elaborate furniture.
Listen, speaking as somebody who worked retail IT for like half a decade, I've dealt with systems where it was designed like that so it would look nice from like a customer facing perspective, and I hate them. They suck so hard to work on. No, screw that. Let them sit on a desk.
Well, we've got time. How come they're allowed to talk so much during the test? I thought that was weird. But because in the end, the guy knew they were talking. He knew Wesley gave the kid the answer.
Or he helped him with the answer. I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know. Yeah, why would you let them talk during a test?
I thought it was weird. And I thought it was unfair because he could have helped the other person too, but he didn't. He helped the guy that he liked or thought was smart or something. I don't know.
Also, I felt so proud of myself because early on when they're all being asked the question about like, what would the intermix ratio be for a warp drive if you have to get 100 light years on warp 8 and all this stuff? And I'm just like, wait, it doesn't matter what the conditions are. It's the intermix chamber. You're mixing antimatter and matter. You want that ratio to be 1-to-1.
And me and my hair twin were over here like, what the hell does that mean? Because we both wouldn't have gotten it.
Yeah, I was just like, hey, I know the answer to that one. And then they all just wrote 1-to-1 on the screen. I'm like, yep, that's correct. That because if your mix ratio isn't exactly 1-to-1, you're going to just create whatever doesn't get annihilated in the mix is going to be propelled violently and destroy the chamber and then the ship.
Yeah. And see, I didn't think about. I just was like, more science babble, and I was. And then they all knew it, and the girl didn't. I was like,
There's a lot of technobabble in Star Trek that means nothing, but this is real.
Well, yeah, and I guess I'm slowly learning French, and I'm slowly learning science from the Next Generation. I loved the offer to become commandant. Is that what it was? Commandant of the Starfleet Academy. Mm-hmm. And I know that this is the future, and I guess we don't care about money, but what are the money and benefits? Like, this sounds like a big promotion. Like, Picard, he didn't even think about it. Like, I don't think he really truly thought about leaving the Enterprise.
Yeah, it's not about the benefits or the money. I think it's about the job that you want to do and, working up to that. And yeah, it seemed like Picard wasn't interested in doing that job, even though I'm sure he would have been very good at it. He wants to be on the bridge of a starship. And who would blame him?
He loves it there. Yeah, and in this episode especially, they ran it home. Like they made sure that we understood the things he does influences, because the whole thing was if you went to Starfleet, you could shape the minds. I think that's what Riker said. You could shape the minds of all the people coming through Starfleet. But they showed us how Jean-Luc gets to influence and like come up around the and help the kids on the starship. And it's really good that we've had that character progression of Picard's all through this season, where he's, remember, I used to say I'm Jean-Luc Picard and I'm a dick to kids. And now this episode, he helped that kid that stole the shuttle. That kid looked like a grown man, though.
He was supposed to be like 18 or something.
The kid stole the shuttle. He helped him. He helped Wesley. I think Wesley really grew from that, I have a dad moment with Picard. And so all of that character development of Picard's that, was kind of just throwaway character development, it felt like actually meant something in this episode. And I liked that. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode, and I also really enjoyed that we got like a proper Wesley episode where he wasn't being annoying. Because I find him a little annoying sometimes, but this was a good episode for him.
It was.
And it was a good showcase of his abilities. I also liked, did you catch the 1984 reference?
No.
When he goes into the room for the psych test, the room is labeled 101.
Oh, no, I didn't catch that. I was too busy wondering if David Lynch had directed the psych test, because what is this menacing chair in an empty room?
Well, the room itself looked straight out of like 1984. Like, yes, this
it's
would
true,
be.
Yeah. I thought it was so stupid that he didn't realize it was the test. Like, as soon as there was noises happening in the other room, I was like, okay, dummy, this is the test.
Yeah. I did like the test. It was, and I liked how they explained why it was his fear.
Right.
It was good.
Because it was Wesley Crusher and the Boggart, but the Boggart in this case was him. And his inability to potentially make the decision that would save or kill somebody in an emergency situation. It was a good episode for character development all the way around.
We don't see Murdoch again, but we do see that actor come back as another Benzite because they wanted to have a Benzite character, and they were like, well, we've already got the mold for this actor, so we'll just put him in it. And they even in that episode have Wesley go, Murdoch, and he's like, oh no, I'm not Murdoch, I'm just from his pod, so they're like twins or something.
I liked his breathing apparatus that I assumed was giving him like the chemicals he needed to breathe, because it was like right below his mouth and nose area. And so I assumed that that's what it was. I thought it was an interesting character design without like driving it home. You know?
He doesn't breathe the same air we do. So I assume because it's not enclosed that our air isn't toxic to him, but he just needs something additional that provides. So
have we reached maximum Dad Luke Picard, or is he going to get even more dad-like as we go on?
Oh, there's no, I'm thinking of a particular episode a couple seasons down the line where he is definitely maximal Dad Luke Picard energy. So we're still working on that.
Great, because I love Dad Luke Picard. It's my favorite. So I don't know. I loved both these episodes. Maybe I was just excited to see something I hadn't seen before, but both of them really worked for me. Like I really liked both of them. Oh, you said, and this is about the first episode, but I'm going to ask you anyway because we're here at the end. You said you knew I'd like that episode. Why did you think that? Just because of the way that the episode was laid out, or?
Actually, I was talking about this one.
This one. Okay. Yeah. I like both of them. So,
but I was specifically talking this one because it was a Wesley centric episode. So I knew you'd like it.
I love Wesley. I just, and then I was thinking there was a point where, remember how I asked you who you would cast as Beverly if we were recasting? Yeah. I had this thought while I was watching about how there's not a lot of older white cis guys that I trust, right? Okay. But I trust Jean-Luc Picard with my life. Like I would let this man tell me what to do, and I wouldn't let most men tell me what to do. So, and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking like, who could we cast as Jean-Luc Picard in a reboot? And my thought was, well, there's always Ian McKellen. And then I had this whole thought about how it would be really funny to do a reboot of The Next Generation, but have all Lord of the Rings actors take on the character roles.
Well, and also you're replacing Professor X with Magneto there.
I am, aren't I? Yeah. So I just was like, I would be like, well, Merry and Pippin would be Geordie and Data. And I just started going through all these different people. But I was thinking, I don't think that Ian McKellen would actually make a very good Jean-Luc because he's very serious.
Yeah, no, well, and also he's way too old.
Now at this point, yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure he's retired now, like, right? Like,
does he not act anymore?
The last thing that I think that he did was the Hobbit movies. And I think he's getting way up there in years, so I don't know how much more acting he does. But yeah, I wouldn't cast him.
And are they friends because of X-Men? Is that where they became friends, or did they know each other before that? Do you know?
They've known each other since the 80s. Actually, Ian McKellen told Patrick not to take the job on TNG because he said, if you do Star Trek, you're going to be stuck with that for the rest of your life and it's going to kill your career.
And he has been, but it didn't kill his career.
It didn't kill his career. And he's done plenty since Star Trek that wasn't Star Trek. I mean, he's Professor X. Like, a lot of people, like the generation after me, for them, that is who he is. They don't think of him as Picard. They think of him as Charles Xavier.
Just like when people were like, something about Samwise Gamgee and going to Mordor and all this stuff. And I was like, and then they were calling him Bob Newby from Stranger Things. And I was like, God. No, he's not. No. Like, that man is Samwise Gamgee. Like,
he's that kid from the Goonies.
Bob Newby. Yeah. And the Goonies is even older. Yeah. Yep. The Goonies, home of Thanos and... I
actually drove by the house from Goonies a couple years ago.
Oh, I had a friend that lived in Astoria, and they made me do the whole, and this is where this happened, and I had not actually seen Goonies at that time. Anyhow, we've gotten off on another tangent.
That's fine.
But I think we've wrapped up. We liked these episodes. I liked both of them. Mm-hmm. I'm very excited to see where it keeps going. We're coming to the end of the season. And the one thing we didn't talk about is how Mr. Annoying Middle Management Guy brought up all of our, the greatest hits from the last season. I thought it was almost like a clip episode without the clips.
Yeah, that would be nice if every time we have a potential clip episode, they don't make it an actual clip episode.
Wouldn't it be great? I don't miss clip episodes.
Oh, thank God. There's back in the days when you had to fill 24, 25 episodes a season, I understand, from a production standpoint.
There's even one in the 6th or 7th season of The Office, and that was 2011 or something. They were still doing it then. Yeah.
But now that every show is just 12, 13 episodes, it's fine. You don't need them. It's just here you go.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we did, because I've never sat through a clip episode. If it's a clip episode, even if it's a show I like, I'll just come back the next week. I'm not sitting through clips of something I've already seen before.
I think the only framing device for a clip episode that I ever actually liked was on Alias, when... Sydney is being debriefed by a CIA investigations panel. Mm-hmm. And so she's basically just, explaining all of her, double agency stuff and everything and obviously it's a clip show, so it recaps the whole series, but it was done in a way that it still progressed the plot because she was under investigation.
It is nice when they can, because as they went along, they found plot devices to make those clip shows work. In the Office, they're being bought out by Sabre, and they're coming to see what the value of the company is, and that's how they end up doing the clip episode. So it is nice that eventually we learn to frame it correctly rather than just having clip episodes for no reason. Because I remember the 80s, you'd turn on an episode and sometimes it would just be each commercial break was 10-minute sections of the show without any sort of explanation. So I'm really happy we got away from those. I do hear there's one coming though in the next generation.
The season 2 finale, we'll be getting to that one.
Do I have to actually watch it? I can fast forward through it.
No, I'm going to make you watch it.
Oh, no. Well, and with that, thanks for joining us today. I'm Ari.
I'm GayFesh.
And until next time,
live long and prosper. Thank you for listening. You can find more episodes on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Twitter at RestBothWorlds. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/restofbothworlds for bonus content and hear your name at the end of each episode.